I invite you to listen to my new dramatic action thriller on the Purple Heart Stories channel. I'm sure it won't disappoint you. And please support with a like and subscription if you enjoy it. Chapter 1: The Golden Cave. My name is Connor Ramirez, 38, former Special Forces Reconnaissance Team Commander. My wife Veronica, 34, a psychotherapist, suggested we participate in the reality show Perfect Pair. $5 million for 3 months in a golden cage with round-the-clock cameras to save our marriage. I agreed. That was my first mistake. When you've spent 8 years hunting snipers in the mountains of Afghanistan, you should know how to recognize a trap. But I missed all the signals. And now I've learned the true price of a show where the only prize is survival. A black SUV with tinted windows stopped at the entrance to the complex. I got out first, automatically scanning the territory. 2 visible surveillance cameras on the perimeter, a guard with military bearing, and the subtle outline of a holster under his jacket. Too serious for an entertainment show. Veronica slipped out after me, her chestnut hair glistening in the setting sun. She squeezed my hand. "This will be amazing, Con, our fresh start." I nodded but didn't answer. Silence had long settled between us, thick as smoke over a battlefield. After my discharge from the army, something broke. Something that neither her professional skills as a psychotherapist nor my attempts to become normal could fix. We were greeted by a woman with a tablet and a flawless smile, who introduced herself as Clara Davis, executive producer. "Welcome to Perfect Pair. We're thrilled to have you with us." Her gaze lingered for a second on the scar beneath my left collarbone, visible in the neckline of my t-shirt. "Especially you, Major Ramirez. Your service record is impressive." I tensed. In the press release, I was presented simply as a former military man. The details of my service were classified. "Just Connor. I've been retired for a long time." "Of course," she nodded with an understanding smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Let's proceed. The other couples are already here." The complex was breathtaking. A modern 3-story building of glass and concrete surrounded by a manicured park. Inside awaited a spacious hall with marble floors and a glass wall opening to an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Everything screamed money, serious money, much more than required for shooting an average reality show. 6 couples stood in groups, holding champagne glasses. I automatically assessed each man as a potential threat, a habit I couldn't shake. 2 stood out. A tall blonde with the posture of a career military man and a stocky brunette with the movements of a wrestler. "Meet our final participants, Connor and Veronica Ramirez," announced Clara. The blonde approached first, extending his hand. "David Michaels. This is my wife Helen, Marine." "Intelligence," I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm. "You served too." "Ranger 2 tour in Iraq." We exchanged a brief appraising glance. I understood that he, like me, had automatically calculated all exits from the room and noted the surveillance cameras located in strange places. Odd for a show that should be filming participants, not providing total surveillance. After the cocktail, we gathered in the conference room. The head producer Richard Kane appeared, a fit 50-year-old man with silver temples and 2 white teeth. "Welcome to Perfect Pair, a unique reality show where we'll test the strength of your relationships." His voice was soft, but I caught the steely notes of a man accustomed to giving orders. "For 3 months, you'll be in complete isolation, competing in challenges that will test every aspect of your life together. Our viewers will watch you around the clock and in the later stages, vote to eliminate a couple each week." He paused, scanning us with his gaze. "The challenges will be stressful, sometimes extreme. We want to see real emotions, real crises, and real reconciliation. The uniqueness of our show is that it doesn't aim to create conflict. It merely reveals what already exists." Something in his intonation made the back of my neck prickle. It reminded me of briefings before particularly complex operations. the ones where command deliberately withheld information. After the briefing, we were escorted to our accommodations, luxurious rooms with panoramic windows. When the door closed, my first action was to check the space for cameras and microphones. I found 4, in the living room, bedroom, bathroom, and on the balcony. Professionally installed but not hidden. They wanted us to know we were being watched, which was strange for a show where participants usually forget about the cameras. Veronica observed my actions with a smile. "Paranoia still haunting you, Major?" "Professional deformation," I replied, examining the door lock. "Electronic with a key card. Not the most difficult to hack, but definitely not what they put in ordinary hotel rooms." "Don't you find this strange?" I nodded toward the camera in the bedroom corner. "Too serious security, too expensive equipment. Where's the film crew? Where are the sound operators, the assistants?" Veronica came over and put her hands on my shoulders. "They're all behind the scenes, darling. This is a high-tech production studio." Her fingers found the knot of tension in my neck, but instead of relief, I felt my muscles tense even more. Something was wrong. Something in her touch seemed incorrect, but I couldn't determine what exactly. That night I barely slept. Old habit, always spending the first night in a new place in semi-wakefulness, studying sounds, smells, the slightest changes in the surrounding environment. I noticed that the air conditioner worked with a peculiar periodicity, and the guards changed every 4 hours. Too strict a regime for an entertainment project. The first challenge began the next morning. We gathered in a special hall equipped as a studio with a podium and screens. Kane announced the conditions. Trust test. Each couple will receive difficult questions about each other. For each wrong answer, penalty points. The couple with the most penalties will receive a special challenge. They started with harmless questions, favorite color, dish, movie. Then the questions became deeper. Our turn came. "Veronica," Kane smiled his fake smile, "what is Connor's worst nightmare?" I tensed. This wasn't in the questionnaires we filled out, and I had never told Veronica about my nightmares. Never. Veronica didn't even hesitate. "He's back in the desert in Helmand Province. His team was ambushed. He's the only survivor, and he hears the Taliban approaching to cut off his comrades' heads, but he can't move." Icy horror ran down my spine. She described my nightmare with frightening accuracy, a nightmare I had never described to anyone, not even army psychologists. How did she know? And why did she say it so calmly, without a trace of emotion, as if reading a weather forecast? I should have been alarmed even then, but instead I told myself she had guessed. After all, she was a psychotherapist specializing in PTSD. We successfully passed the challenge. The Johnsons accumulated the most penalties. Their punishment was a challenge called Overcoming Phobias. Each had to face their greatest fear while their partner watched via video link, unable to help. Mrs. Johnson feared heights. She was suspended in a transparent capsule above the pool at a height of 3 floors. Mr. Johnson, with his fear of blood, had to walk through a room with surgical instruments and containers of what looked like real blood. Both failed. Mrs. Johnson began to suffocate from a panic attack, and Mr. Johnson lost consciousness. The challenge was interrupted, and Kane announced that based on viewer voting, the Johnson couple was eliminated from the show. I noticed that none of the couples had seen the viewer voting. There was no connection with the outside world. No interviews, no live broadcasts. This contradicted the format of any reality show I had ever seen. Later that evening, pretending to go out for a smoke, though I quit 10 years ago, I discreetly followed the security escorting the Johnson family. Instead of heading to the main exit, they turned to the north wing of the building, a wing whose existence we hadn't been told about. The following week brought a series of challenges, each seemingly designed to press the most painful buttons in couples' relationships. Sincere confessions. Participants had to reveal their darkest secrets. Fidelity under pressure. Attractive actors tried to seduce participants while their partners watched from another room. But what troubled me most were the small details that formed a disturbing picture. The cameras in the corridors moved with tactical precision, covering dead zones as is done in military facilities. The guards changed according to special operation schedules, not ordinary security service protocols. And the fact that none of the participants had seen any technical specialists or directors, only personnel who resembled soldiers more than television workers. And then there was Veronica. She was behaving differently. Small things that probably no one else would notice. She forgot the name of the pizza we ate on the night of our first meeting, a detail she always remembered with a smile. But she perfectly remembered the name of my sergeant from my first deployment, which I had mentioned perhaps once during our entire acquaintance. I began secretly dumping the vitamin cocktail they served us every morning into a potted plant. After 3 days, the plant died. On the 10th day, we faced the trust labyrinth challenge. Each couple had to navigate through a complex maze, where one partner was blindfolded and had to rely on directions from the other, who saw the maze layout on a monitor. When our turn came, I put on the blindfold and Veronica began guiding me through the earpiece. At some point, the connection was interrupted for several seconds, a technical glitch, as explained later. I ended up in a dead end, feeling the wall when my fingers found strange scratches. Muffling the sound in my earpiece, I shifted the blindfold just enough to see a message roughly etched into the wall. This is not a show. They kill the losers. Cameras blind 10 sec every 2 hours. I instantly memorized the message and returned the blindfold before communication resumed. My heart was pounding, but outwardly I remained calm. 8 years in special forces taught me to hide reactions. We won the challenge, and I had time to consider what I'd seen. It could have been someone's cruel joke, or the paranoia of a previous participant, but my instinct screamed danger. That night I didn't sleep, observing the cameras in our room. At 2:42, the red indicator on the main camera went out for exactly 10 seconds, then came back on. At 4:42, the same thing happened. I established a pattern. The next day, during a group workout in the gym, I deliberately strained a muscle and asked permission to return to our room early. In the corridor, I spotted a technician, a nervous man in his 60s with disheveled gray hair, who was fiddling with a power panel. I knew the next 10-second interval of camera blindness would come soon. Approaching the technician, I deliberately bumped into him, scattering his tools. "Sorry," I bent down, helping to gather the screwdrivers, and noticed his badge. A Fisher Technical Systems. The technician avoided my gaze, his hands slightly trembling. "No problem, Mr. Ramirez," he mumbled and hastily left. He knew my name, though I hadn't introduced myself, and he was definitely more nervous about my presence than he should have been from a random collision. In the evening, returning from dinner, I found a folded note in my pants pocket. I didn't remember putting anything there. Unfolding it in the bathroom, away from the cameras, I read, "Central Point, 2:30, code 6472, I'm Fisher." The note was written in the hurried handwriting of someone accustomed to making numerous notes, like scientists or engineers. I destroyed it, flushing it down the toilet. At 2:28 at night, having counted the exact period of camera deactivation, I slipped out of the room. The central point could only mean one thing, the main technical area, which I had noticed on the fire evacuation scheme. Using my experience of infiltrating secure facilities, I moved silently through the corridors, avoiding security patrols, whose movement precision now had an ominous meaning for me. I reached an inconspicuous door hidden behind a decorative panel and entered the code. The lock clicked. Inside, the gray-haired technician, Dr. Adrian Fisher, was waiting for me, nervously fidgeting his fingers in a rhythmic sequence. "Major Ramirez," his voice was quiet and tense, We have little time, follow me. He led me through a maze of technical corridors to a small room filled with monitors. Unlike the control center displayed for show that we were shown on the first day, this was a real operational observation room. I risked my life to contact you, Fisher spoke quickly, his eyes constantly moving between monitors. Your military experience makes you the only one who can help. This is not a reality show, Major. It's an experiment, a sadistic game. I nodded silently, waiting for him to continue. See these monitors? Fisher pointed to screens where people in expensive suits were watching the show's participants. These are the real viewers. Billionaires, politicians, celebrities. They pay millions for the opportunity to watch couples fall apart under pressure. They bet on how soon and in what manner the breakup will occur. He switched one of the monitors, and I saw a room resembling a gas chamber. Inside lay two bodies, a man and a woman whom I recognized as Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Elimination from the show is not just elimination, Fisher's voice trembled. It's liquidation. No one should tell the truth about what happens here. The shock of what I saw was replaced by cold fury. My muscles tensed, preparing for action. Who's behind this? My voice sounded foreign even to myself, as if I were back in combat operation mode. An organization without a name, a network of the wealthiest perverts seeking new forms of entertainment because ordinary ones have bored them. Fisher quickly switched cameras. I joined the project as a neurochemist, thinking we were studying relationship psychology for therapeutic purposes. When I realized the truth, it was too late to leave. He caught his breath, his hands trembling more intensely. But that's not all, Major Ramirez. There's something you must see, something that concerns you personally. Fisher typed a code on the keyboard, and the central screen showed an image of another wing of the building. There, in a room identical to mine and Veronica's, I saw Veronica, my wife. She was laughing, sitting on a bed with a man who looked exactly like me. An icy wave passed through my body. I involuntarily took a step toward the screen. What the hell is this? A double experiment, Fisher's voice sounded almost sympathetic. The woman you're living with here is not your wife. Her name is Eva Larson, an actress. She underwent appearance modification to be indistinguishable from your wife. Memories of the past few days swirled through my head like a whirlwind. The oddities in Veronica's behavior, her unnatural reactions, details she remembered and forgot. Your real wife is in the East Wing with another man, whom she believes to be you, continued Fisher. The organizers created two identical pairs for the special entertainment of their wealthiest clients. They want to observe how relationships will develop differently depending on small psychological interventions. I watched as my real wife placed her hand on this, Double's shoulder. Her smile was genuine, her eyes glowing with that special light I hadn't seen for many months. Why, I could barely speak. What's the point of all this? Entertainment, Fisher shrugged, and scientific interest of a certain kind. Most couples here are selected based on existing relationship problems, but you and your wife, you were chosen because of your perfect profile. A former Special Forces soldier with PTSD and a psychotherapist specializing in military trauma. The perfect subject for studying resilience in the face of betrayal. I felt the familiar combat coldness filling me. Emotions receded, giving way to tactical thinking. You're taking a risk by telling me this. Why? Fisher met my gaze for the first time since the beginning of our conversation. Because I can no longer be a part of this, and because you're the only one who can stop it, with your training, your skills. If anyone can escape from here and save the others, it's you. I nodded, already calculating options. What happens to the eliminated couples? They're gassed, then cremated. Officially, they signed non-disclosure agreements and received compensation for their silence. I need to see my real wife. Impossible right now, Fisher shook his head. The wings are strictly isolated. The only passage is personally controlled by Kane and requires biometric authentication. When is the next elimination? In 3 days. And I'm almost certain that next will be either you or your wife with the double. They like to create dramatic situations for the finale. I looked at the clock. We had been talking for almost 8 minutes, too long. I need to return before they notice my absence. How can I contact you? Fisher quickly sketched a diagram on a piece of paper. These rooms aren't monitored from 2:30 to 2:50. Use this route. I memorized the diagram, returned the paper to him, and headed for the exit. By the way, I stopped at the door. What did you mean by psychological interventions? Microdoses of psychoactive substances in food and water, visual and auditory triggers, manipulation of social dynamics, everything to provoke programmed emotional responses. Fisher looked at his watch. Time's up. Go. I silently returned to our room, slipped under the blanket next to the woman I thought was my wife Eva. She didn't wake up, but turned toward me in her sleep, instinctively pressing closer. I lay motionless, staring at the ceiling. Everything I knew, everything I felt, turned out to be a lie. A perfectly staged performance. A trained professional who had spent years in life-threatening situations. I didn't notice that I was living with a stranger. I looked at her profile in the semi-darkness of the room and saw my Veronica. Every feature was a perfect copy, and yet, I should have known, should have felt the difference. I woke up in the morning with a clear action plan. I needed more information and evidence. While Veronica was at a group yoga session, I thoroughly searched our room, avoiding cameras. In the lining of her cosmetic bag, I found a flash drive. Inserting it into the tablet when I was sure the cameras were temporarily blind, I discovered a set of instructions and video files. In one of them, my real wife and her husband were taking the trust dance test, the same one that Eva and I had taken 3 days ago. But unlike our stiff coordination, they moved as one. Veronica was looking at this man with obvious adoration. Next to the bed, I carefully checked the neck of the sleeping Veronica and discovered a thin scar behind her right ear, so skillfully camouflaged that it could only be noticed in certain lighting. A scar that my real wife never had. I returned the flash drive to its place and sat on the edge of the bed, contemplating my next move. Suddenly, Veronica stirred and opened her eyes. "What are you doing, Connor?" Her voice was sleepy, but anxiety flashed in her eyes. In that second, I realized the mask had slipped. She could see from my face that I knew the truth, and I could see from her eyes that she was afraid. The game had begun. Chapter 2: Mirror Reflection. I looked into the eyes of the woman I thought was my wife and saw fear in them. Not guilt, not cunning, ordinary human fear, the kind I'd seen in the eyes of hostages and innocent bystanders in combat zones. The fear of a victim, not a criminal. But right now, that didn't matter. I needed answers. 7 years in special forces had taught me one irrefutable fact. Truth always comes faster when the victim thinks they have nothing to lose. I moved unexpectedly and swiftly. In one smooth motion, I closed the distance, pinned her to the wall, forearm at her throat, not completely blocking her breathing, but enough to demonstrate the seriousness of my intentions. "Who are you?" My voice sounded quiet and dangerously calm. She tried to push me away, but I was stronger. Panic flashed in her gaze. "Connor, what are you? What are you talking about?" She was gasping, and not only from the pressure on her throat. "Don't play with me," I paused. "I saw the scar behind your ear. I saw the real Veronica on the monitors. And I know about the flash drive in your cosmetic bag with instructions. Who are you?" I released the pressure on her throat but didn't step back. For a second she looked into my eyes, then something broke in her gaze. Her shoulders slumped as if the core had been taken out of her. "My name is Eva." Her voice sounded different, with a slight accent she had so carefully hidden. "Eva Larson." "Explain." She slid down the wall to the floor, hugging her knees. I stepped back but remained alert, blocking the path to the door. Her hands trembled slightly, another sign I'd never seen in my wife. "I was an actress in experimental theater in Berlin," she began. "3 years ago, I was recruited for this project. They said it was groundbreaking work at the intersection of psychology and art." She raised her hand to her right ear, unconsciously touching the scar. "First came training studying your wife, recordings of her speech, movements, habits, then plastic surgeries, several stages, face correction, figure. They even changed my voice timbre." I tried not to show emotions, but inside I was boiling with a mixture of rage and disgust. At her, at the organizers, at myself, for not noticing the substitution. "Why did you agree?" Her gaze clouded. "I didn't agree, not to this. At first they deceived me, and then—" She rolled up her sleeve and showed almost invisible injection marks on the inside of her elbow. "They keep me on special drugs, a combination that enhances suggestibility and creates dependency. If I miss even one dose, withdrawal begins. I tried. Once." Part of me wanted to call this a convenient lie, but my intuition, honed by years of extracting truth in the most extreme conditions, told me she wasn't lying, at least not completely. "Show me your bracelet," I demanded, remembering information that had flashed on the flash drive. Confusion in her eyes gave way to surprise. Slowly she pulled out a worn, woven bracelet of colorful threads from under her pillow. "How did you? Why do you keep it?" Her eyes filled with tears. "The only thing from my past life. Mom wove it before they took her. I was 9. This matched the data on the flash drive. And if she were just playing a role, she would have chosen a more dramatic story, as professional manipulators do. Her story was too banal to be a lie. Why did they need to replace my wife? What's the purpose of all this?" Eva wiped tears with her palm, a gesture I had never seen from Veronica, who always used a handkerchief. "Entertainment, control, power. Clients pay huge money to watch couples fall apart under pressure, especially ones like you with unique psychological profiles." She paused. "But your case is special. They created 2 identical pairs for an experiment, comparing how relationships develop under different conditions. They call it the mirror protocol. And my wife doesn't know she's living with a double." "No, at least she shouldn't know. Her partner is a professional, a much better actor than me. He completely became you, only an improved version." Fury rose in me with new force. I clenched my fist so tight my knuckles turned white. "If you're lying to me now—" "Why would I lie?" She looked straight into my eyes. "You already know enough to kill me. And now that you know the truth, the organizers will eliminate me anyway as a compromised resource." I analyzed the situation. If she was telling the truth, she was as much a victim as I was, and she could be useful. "What else do you know about the complex systems, guard schedules, access codes?" The first glimmer of hope appeared in her eyes. "A lot. I have access to certain zones for the acting staff, and I know when technical checks happen." "Good, you'll work with me. One condition, no more games. You're not my wife. Don't pretend to be her." She nodded. "What about?" She pointed to the surveillance camera. "Continue playing for the public, but in private you're Eva, not Veronica. There's something else you should know." She lowered her voice. "I have contact with Dr. Fisher. He wants to meet with both of us tonight." This was a risk, but in this situation, inaction was even more dangerous. "Where and when?" "At 2:30 at night, we slipped past cameras, using blind spots I had already mapped. Eva moved with unexpected grace, silent as a cat. We reached the service corridor where Fisher was waiting for us, nervously fidgeting his fingers in a pattern visible only to him. Quickly, Major Ramirez. "Miss Larson," he nodded, avoiding direct eye contact. "Follow me and don't make a sound." He led us even deeper into the labyrinth of technical rooms than I had ventured before. We passed through several doors with fingerprint scanners until we found ourselves in a small room filled with old monitors and server racks. The air here was noticeably warmer and drier due to the operating equipment. "This is the archive server room," Fisher explained. "The only place without active surveillance. They consider it obsolete." He took out a tattered notebook covered with strange symbols from his pocket. "We have little time. The organizers are accelerating the schedule. In 2 days, the final phase is planned, the confrontation of both pairs." "For what purpose?" I asked. "The denouement for VIP viewers. The culmination. They want to see your reaction when you meet your wife who doesn't recognize you and a person wearing your face." Fisher opened his laptop and displayed a 3D diagram of the complex. "Here we are now," he pointed to a spot in the northwest wing, "and here your real wife is being held." His finger moved to the opposite end of the diagram. "Between them are several levels of security, biometric scanners, and the cleansing protocol." "What protocol?" "The last-line security system. If the experiment is compromised, all participants and unwanted witnesses are eliminated, and the complex is destroyed. That's how they protect their VIP clients from exposure." Fisher turned to Eva. "You must continue performing your role. Any deviation activates a check." She nodded. "I can help with the guard schedule. We actors are instructed about changes in the timetable." "Good," Fisher turned back to me. "There's something else critical you should know, Major. All participants, including your real wife, have neuroimplants." He handed me photographs showing an almost invisible scar on the neck, exactly like the one I noticed on Eva's neck. Subdermal implants of a new generation, developed for this project. They release microdoses of psychoactive substances and can generate weak electromagnetic impulses affecting certain brain areas. A chill ran down my spine. "For what purpose?" "To enhance or suppress emotional reactions, makes people more suggestible, strengthens attachment or rejection, especially effective when combined with drugs in food and visual triggers." "And my wife has one too." "Yes, it's activated remotely from the control room. If we want to free her, we need to neutralize the implant." Eva, who had been listening attentively, asked, "Do I have one too?" Fisher nodded. "Yes, but a different modification. Yours doesn't require remote activation. It simply maintains the chemical balance for your role." I tried to comprehend the scale of all this. As I contemplated a plan of action, Fisher continued, "I can give you access to the side corridors. These aren't the main passages, but you'll be able to move unnoticed at certain hours." He handed me a key card and a set of codes, written in his encrypted symbols, which he immediately explained. "But most importantly, you need to infiltrate the main control room to disable the implants before you meet your real wife. Otherwise, she simply won't believe you. The implant will strengthen her attachment to the double." I looked at the diagram, analyzing possible infiltration routes, assessing risks and the probability of success. "We need more information about the double." Fisher and Eva exchanged glances. "His name is Vincent Mork," said Eva. "He's not just an actor, he's a psychologist, one of the main ideologues of the project." "And that's not all," added Fisher. "He's obsessed with you, Major. He studied your profile, your psychological reactions for years. Perhaps he's the one who chose you for this experiment." I recalled my analysis of participants and security on the first day. Had something escaped my attention? Were there hints, warnings that I ignored? "Well, then we have a target and a timeline." I folded the diagram, having memorized the key routes. "Now we need an infiltration plan." I spent the next night in a secret observation room, to which Fisher had provided me access. Eva remained in our room, maintaining the appearance of normalcy. I watched the monitors on which my real wife and the man with my face were taking a test similar to a dance competition. Their movements were synchronized, perfectly coordinated. My Veronica laughed when he whispered something in her ear, an intimate gesture we hadn't done for over a year. "Remarkable, isn't it?" Fisher quietly said, appearing behind me. "Psychological compatibility at 97%, a rare case even in our work." I didn't answer, trying to suppress a wave of fury and nauseating jealousy. This wasn't just deception, it was the deepest betrayal, an invasion of the most personal. How did they achieve this? A combination of factors. Mork has studied you for years, knows every detail of your psychology, plus drugs in your wife's food that enhance emotional attachment, and of course, the implant. I shifted my gaze to another monitor, where a group of people in expensive suits watched this spectacle, sipping champagne. Who are these people? VIP clients. Pay millions for access to the broadcast. Place bets on developments. Many are notorious for their cruelty in their industries: finance, politics, entertainment. Fisher switched the channel to a meeting room where Kane and other organizers were discussing details of the final phase. "The confrontation must be as dramatic as possible," Kane was saying. "The alpha pair and the omega pair meet face to face, doubles who don't know about each other's existence. Mork is confident his pair will win, says he's completely rewritten the wife's personality." "Odds on the outcome?" someone off-camera asked. 3-1 on bloodshed, Kane replied with a smirk. "The VIP from Dubai bet $1 million that Ramirez will kill his double." I watched this with cold fury that once helped me survive the hell of combat operations. Now it was my salvation. Through anger, I didn't feel the pain of betrayal. "I've seen enough," I told Fisher. "Show me the implant control room." He switched the camera to a small room with several computers and specialized equipment. "This is where they control all implants. Each is individually configured. Deactivation requires a special code." "Which you have?" "Not exactly. I need to get there personally to gain access." I nodded, calculating infiltration options. "Then we need to plan a synchronized operation. You disable the implants while I extract my wife." Fisher rubbed his hands in a nervous gesture. "It's more complicated than it seems. Security is heightened, and there's another problem." "What?" "I'm almost certain they're watching me. If I disappear, they'll start searching. We must act very carefully." He was right, and this complicated our plan. But I was used to working with variables that constantly change. "Then we'll separate. You handle the implants and I." Our conversation was interrupted by an alarm on one of the monitors. Fisher quickly approached the screen. "Damn, that's my laboratory. Someone has infiltrated." He abruptly fell silent, looking at the screen with an expression of pure horror. The monitor showed an armed guard methodically searching the premises. "They know or suspect," whispered Fisher. "I must return or it will confirm their suspicions." "Too risky." "I have no choice, Major. Without me, you won't be able to disable the implants. I'll try to distract their attention." Before I could object, Fisher left, leaving me alone before the monitors. 15 minutes later, I saw him enter his laboratory, feigning surprise at the sight of security. He was explaining something, waving his hands, apparently justifying his absence. I switched to another camera to check Eva's status. She was sitting in our room, reading a book, a perfect picture of normalcy. There wasn't a trace of tension on her face. Returning to the room late at night, I found Eva sleeping, or pretending to sleep. I lay down beside her but didn't close my eyes, analyzing what I'd seen and planning the next steps. In the morning, Fisher wasn't at his usual place. Eva noticed my concern during breakfast but didn't show it, continuing to play the role of a loving wife for the cameras. Only when we went out for our morning walk in the garden did she whisper, Something happened. Fisher, security was searching his laboratory yesterday. He went to explain himself. She squeezed my hand, a gesture that looked loving to observers but conveyed anxiety. That's bad if they suspect him. We couldn't speak openly, being under observation. Instead, we continued our walk, feigning normalcy. Later that day, they announced a special challenge, candid confession. Each couple had to publicly tell about the most painful moment in their relationship. Such tests were always the worst. They turned emotions inside out for the entertainment of rich perverts. Eva and I prepared a convincing enough story based on real events from my marriage. During the performance, I noticed Fisher's absence among the technical staff. This increased my concern. After the challenge, returning to our room, we found a note that had slipped under the door. Central ventilation shaft. Now. Using camera blind spots, we reached the designated place. Fisher wasn't there. Instead, we found a bloodied notebook with his special symbols and a small object wrapped in cloth. With the cold methodology of a man who had seen too much death, I unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a microchip, covered in dried blood. God, whispered Eva, covering her mouth with her hand. I examined the shaft and noticed bloodstains leading upward. Dr. Adrian Fisher was no longer among the living, that I knew for certain. The question was whether he had managed to pass on critically important information to us. Returning to the room, we acted with extreme caution. During a meal, Kane announced a tragedy. Dr. Fisher had committed suicide due to a personal nervous breakdown. I exchanged glances with Eva. We both knew this was a lie. At night, in the safety of a camera blind spot, I examined the contents of the microchip, using a tablet modified by Fisher to bypass the surveillance system. The chip contained a massive array of data, complex schematics, access codes, personal files of participants, and a video message from Fisher. In the recording, he looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. Major Ramirez, if you're watching this, it means I'm already dead. I knew this would happen, but I hope to have time to help you. Here's what you need to know. There's something they didn't anticipate. Mork has become obsessed with the idea of surpassing you. He's no longer just playing a role. He considers himself your improved version. And I'm afraid your wife has also succumbed to this illusion, even without the influence of implants. Judging by her biometric indicators, she's genuinely in love with Mork. I stopped the video, unable to watch further. My world collapsed for the second time in these days. The first time, when I learned that my wife was an actress, now learning that my real wife had betrayed me. Eva was silent, giving me time to cope with the shock. Finally, she quietly asked, "What will we do?" I turned the recording back on. Fisher continued, "But I have a plan. Here are the implant deactivation codes and access codes to the morgue. If you stage your death during a challenge, they'll transport your body to the morgue from where you can infiltrate the East Wing. It's the only way to bypass the biometric scanners at the sector boundaries." Fisher explained the details of the plan, then concluded, "Redeem my sins, Major. Stop them. I realized too late what we created." The recording ended. I sat motionless, processing the information and betrayal. My wife's betrayal turned out deeper than I could have imagined. Eva touched my hand. "I'm sorry," she said simply. I looked at her, a woman with my wife's face who turned out to be more honest than the original. I have no choice, I made a decision. I must save her regardless of what she's done, and then stop these bastards. Eva nodded. "I'll help you. I know how to obtain a death-simulating drug. One of the actors used it in the last season for dramatic effect. It's dangerous for you." "My life is already in danger," she gave a bitter smile. "From the moment you exposed me, I've been living on borrowed time. As soon as they realize you know the truth, they'll eliminate me as a compromised resource." I studied her face, so familiar yet foreign. Strangely, I was beginning to trust her more than I had ever trusted my real wife. All right, let's prepare for the final phase. The next 24 hours were spent in thorough preparation. Eva obtained the drug from the medical storage, using her actor's access. I studied all routes and access codes left by Fisher. We synchronized our watches and rehearsed key moments of the plan. And then came the day of the final challenge. It was called Ultimate Truth, a test in which couples had to confess their darkest secrets in front of all other participants. Eva and I stepped onto the podium. Cameras tracked every movement. I felt tension emanating from the entire film crew. They too knew today was special. Kane announced the beginning. Today we'll test how deep your connection is. Each couple must reveal their darkest secret, one they've never even told each other. When our turn came, Eva went first, telling a prepared story about a fictional affair. I observed Kane's reaction. He looked disappointed, expecting something more dramatic. Then came my turn. I stood up and began speaking in an even voice. My secret is simple. I never truly trusted my wife. A whisper ran through the crowd. I continued. Always felt something was wrong, something. At this moment, I slipped my hand into my pocket and discreetly took the drug, dissolving under my tongue. Seconds later, I felt it beginning to work. My heart beat faster, then began to slow. My vision blurred. I staggered, clutched my chest, and collapsed on the stage. The last thing I remember, Eva's scream and the faces of medics bending over me, who didn't suspect they were dealing with a man who had survived Taliban torture and learned to control his vital signs. And then there was darkness. I regained consciousness in a metal box, a pull-out sectional table in the complex's morgue. The sensations were horrifying, but I suppressed panic, focusing on breathing. The drug worked exactly as Fisher described. It simulated death for half an hour, after which the body recovered. Carefully emerging from the box, I quickly surveyed the surroundings. The morgue was empty, as Fisher had predicted. The bodies of eliminated couples were transferred to another room, the crematorium, as we discovered from his records. Using access codes and diagrams, I made my way through the technical corridors of the East Wing. Here, my Special Forces training helped. The ability to move silently, avoid cameras, use blind spots. According to Fisher's data, my real wife and Mork should now be in the preparation room for the final challenge, the very one where our confrontation was planned. Ironically, they were waiting to meet us, not suspecting that I was already dead according to the organizer's version. I reached the indicated room and paused at the door, listening. Inside were voices, a female one, which I instantly recognized as my real wife's, and a male one, strangely similar to my own but with barely perceptible differences in intonation. Using Fisher's last code, I unlocked the door and entered, holding an improvised weapon at the ready, a scalpel taken from the morgue. Inside the room stood two people, a woman, my real wife Veronica, with an expression of absolute shock on her face, and a man, a double with my face, in whom I instantly recognized Vincent Mork by his eyes, the eyes of a man accustomed to dissecting others' lives. "Connor," Veronica said uncertainly, shifting her gaze between me and the double. What's happening?" Mork reacted faster. With a professional movement, he pushed Veronica behind him, taking a defensive stance. "Security," he shouted, "intrusion." I lunged forward before security could react. But at that moment, an armed guard burst in. Mork instantly extracted a hidden pistol and shot him in the head, an action I never expected. We froze in a bizarre triangle. Me with a scalpel, Mork with a gun, and my wife pressed against the wall with an expression of complete incomprehension. "What are you doing?" She looked in horror at Mork, then at the guard's body. "Saving us, darling," replied Mork, not taking his eyes off me. "This man is a dangerous criminal. He escaped from the East Wing." But he, Veronica faltered, shifting her gaze between us. He looks exactly like you. Because he's my twin, Mork lied without blinking. The one I told you about, a psychopath obsessed with stealing my life. I almost admired the speed of his reaction and the ingenuity of his lie. But Veronica was looking at me with growing fear and distrust. Her implant was surely working at full power, enhancing her distrust of me and attachment to the double. Veronica, I took a step forward. I'm your real husband. This man is an imposter. All this is part of an experiment. She recoiled from me, instinctively pressing closer to Mork. Connor, he's dangerous, she whispered to her husband. He talks like you. Mork placed his hand on her shoulder in a protective gesture. I need to get you out of here to safety. Then I'll come back and deal with him, he turned to me. I'm an FBI agent working undercover. We've been investigating this organization for over a year. I smirked. Nice try, Mork, but I know who you really are. A psychologist psychopath, the chief architect of this experiment. Doubt flickered in Veronica's eyes. Mork noticed this and immediately went on the offensive. He's dangerous and delusional. Come, I know a safe way out of here. He pulled Veronica toward the door, keeping me at gunpoint. I had to act immediately. If you're an FBI agent, why did you shoot the guard instead of neutralizing him? I asked, not taking my eyes off the pistol. And why do you know the layout of this complex better than a professional reconnaissance officer? This made Veronica hesitate. She looked from one of us to the other, desperately trying to find some distinction. I don't understand, her voice trembled. How is this possible? The implant on your neck, I pointed to the almost invisible scar. They're controlling your emotions, your attachment. Everything you feel for this man is chemically induced. It's not real. Veronica's hand instinctively darted to her neck. She felt the scar, whose existence she clearly wasn't aware of. Doubt reflected on her face. Mork instantly reacted, going on the offensive. No time to explain. The entire complex security will be here soon. I'm an FBI agent working undercover for over a year. We're investigating this organization. You just need to trust me. His lie was brilliant, quick, convincing, and close enough to the truth to seem plausible. Mork skillfully turned the situation around, making himself the hero and me the villain. Veronica looked confused, but I noticed how she instinctively took a step closer to him. The implant was working flawlessly. If you're my real husband, she said in a trembling voice, addressing me, tell me something only the two of us would know, something no one else could know. This was my chance. The night before our wedding, I said, not taking my eyes off her, you confessed that you feared your love wasn't enough to heal my scars. And I replied that the main scar isn't the one under my collarbone, but the one in my soul, left by my father. And you promised that you would never leave me like he did. Her eyes widened. Something flickered in them, recognition, uncertainty. But Mork immediately countered. Obviously, he had access to our personal files. All conversations were recorded. Remember, darling, what I told you about personality imitation technologies. They spent years creating a perfect copy. To my horror, the doubt in Veronica's eyes was replaced by wariness toward me. She nodded, accepting Mork's explanation. The tense moment was interrupted by the sounds of approaching security. Mork sharply raised his pistol, aiming at the door. We need to leave right now. I know a safe route. He surprised me by lowering his weapon and handing it to Veronica. Keep him at gunpoint. If he tries to attack, shoot. Veronica uncertainly accepted the pistol, pointing it in my direction. Her hand trembled slightly, but her eyes were determined. She believed Mork. Now follow me, he commanded. And no foolishness. Your life depends on it. This was addressed to me. I nodded, deciding to play along. Right now, it was more important to stay with Veronica, to find a way to free her from the implant's influence. Mork confidently led us through a labyrinth of corridors, unerringly choosing directions at each fork. Veronica noticeably calmed, trusting his guidance. Her closeness to him and alienation from me were tearing my heart apart. We made our way through technical rooms, service corridors, and ventilation shafts. Mork perfectly knew the location of cameras and patrol schedules. Every detail convinced Veronica of the truth of his story. She looked at me less and less, and at him more and more. After 20 minutes of tense advancement, we reached a massive steel door marked Emergency Exit. Mork entered a complex combination on the access panel. "This will lead us to a service tunnel," he explained. "At the end of the tunnel is a car with documents and money. We're going straight to the Federal Center." The door creaked open, revealing a dark corridor. "Veronica, go first," said Mork. "I'll cover the rear." She hesitated, looking at me, then at Mork. Some intuition, deeper than the implanted attachment, made her waver. "How do you know all these codes?" she asked quietly. "Even an undercover agent." "Trust me," he smiled my smile. "I'll explain everything when we're safe." Veronica stepped into the tunnel. Mork gestured for me to follow her. As soon as I crossed the threshold, the heavy door slammed shut. Mork remained outside. In the dim emergency lighting, I saw him watching us through a small window in the door. Then his face contorted in a smirk, and he entered a code on the external panel, activating the lock. He turned and walked away, but his voice still carried for a few seconds through the announcement system. "Enjoy the next phase of the experiment. It will be educational." Veronica turned to me, her eyes widening with horror and understanding. She tightly gripped the pistol she still held, pointing it at me with new uncertainty. "Connor, is it really you?" Before I could answer, red emergency lights flooded the corridor, and a mechanical voice announced, "Attention, cleansing protocol activated. All personnel have 15 minutes to evacuate. Repeat, cleansing protocol activated." Chapter 3, Shattered Mirror. The mechanical voice echoed through the corridor, bouncing off the steel walls. For a moment, Veronica and I stood frozen, staring at each other. She still pointed the gun at me, but now uncertainty, not fear, filled her eyes. 15 minutes. 900 seconds before the entire complex would become a mass grave for everyone left inside. 15 minutes to decide whom to trust, I said quietly. The man you've known for 7 years, or the one who just locked us in here and left. We both knew there was no one else in the tunnel, that at its end was not salvation but, probably, a gas chamber. Mork had driven us exactly where he planned. Veronica lowered the pistol. Not completely, but enough for me to see. The decision had been made. "If you really are my husband," her voice trembled, "we have 15 minutes to get out of here, and if not, we'll die anyway." I nodded and extended my hand. "I'll need that." After a moment's hesitation, she handed me the pistol. The first barrier of trust had been overcome. Now we had to escape the deadly trap. The tunnel turned out to be longer than I expected and led not to an exit but, as I suspected, to a sealed chamber. Examining the space, I quickly discovered a ventilation grate of sufficient size. Using improvised tools, I unscrewed the fastenings. "Can you fit through?" I asked Veronica. "If you can, I can." She tried to sound brave, but I saw beads of sweat on her forehead, and not just from physical exertion. I moved first, checking the path and helping her squeeze through narrow sections. We crawled in complete darkness, orienting only by my instincts and memory of several turns from Fisher's diagrams. Time was running out. By my calculations, we had no more than 10 minutes left. "Connor," whispered Veronica when we made a brief stop, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For not recognizing you, for trusting him." I remembered the biochemical implants, drugs in the food, psychological manipulations. "It wasn't your choice. They changed your brain chemistry." "But part of me should have known." Her voice sounded muffled in the confined space of the shaft. How could I not distinguish my own husband? I didn't answer that I had asked myself the same question about the fake Veronica. How could I not notice the substitution? How could I sleep next to a stranger, accepting her as my wife? "Let's keep moving," was all I said, feeling time slipping through my fingers. Emerging from the ventilation shaft, we found ourselves in a technical room with monitors and control panels. The mechanical voice continued counting down to the activation of the cleansing protocol, now at 7 minutes. On one of the screens, I saw a map of the complex with marked evacuation routes for personnel. We were in the southeast sector, and the nearest exit was about 3 minutes of quick running away. I had already turned to lead Veronica to safety when my attention was caught by another map, a diagram of blocks with participants. 4 couples were still being held in isolated rooms with no chance of escape. "We have to help them," said Veronica, noticing my gaze. 6 minutes until detonation. The route to the block with the couples would add another 5 minutes round trip. "It's almost guaranteed suicide," I replied, calculating options. "Let's reach the exit, call for help." "We're the only ones here who know the truth," she placed her hand on my shoulder. "If not us, then who?" In her eyes I saw a reflection of my own guilt, survivor's guilt, the kind that had haunted me after the operation in Helmand, when I was the only one left alive from the entire group. I nodded. The decision was made. 5 minutes and 30 seconds until detonation. We ran through the empty corridors of the complex, heading to the participants' containment block. Most of the personnel had already evacuated, but we had an unpleasant encounter with 2 guards who had to be neutralized. Veronica surprised me. Without a hint of doubt, she joined the fight shoulder to shoulder with me, applying self-defense techniques I had once shown her. Reaching the containment block, we discovered the cell doors were locked by an electronic system with central control. 3 minutes 15 seconds, Veronica counted down as I tried to hack the system. "Come on, Connor." I frantically tried combinations. Eventually, I had to use a force solution. I shot the control panel and the locks clicked open one by one. Participants began to emerge, confused and frightened. "Follow us," I shouted. "We have less than 3 minutes before this whole complex blows up." We led them through corridors to the nearest exit. Suddenly, one of the participants, a young woman about 30, cried out and pointed somewhere behind me. I spun around, already knowing what I would see. At the end of the corridor stood Vincent Mork. His once impeccable suit was rumpled, a bruise visible on his temple, but in his hand, he confidently held a pistol aimed at us. "Major Ramirez." His voice was calm despite the situation. How predictable, military men and their hero complex. I could have charted your actions accurate to the second. 2 minutes 40 seconds, I said instead of a reply, gesturing the freed participants toward a side corridor. "Run to the exit, straight, then left and up the stairs." Mork didn't try to stop them. He was interested only in Veronica and me. "Amusing, isn't it?" He took a step forward. "I spent years studying you, creating a perfect copy and improved version, and she still chooses the original, even with the implant, even with chemical correction of emotions. Something in human nature resists perfection." I stood in front of Veronica, shielding her with my body. "Go with them," I whispered. "I'll hold him off." "No," she gripped my shoulder firmly. "Together." Mork observed our exchange with clinical interest. "You really believe you can leave?" he laughed, and this laugh, so similar to my own, made me shudder. The cleansing protocol was activated personally by me. The only one who will leave this complex is me, because only I know the deactivation codes and the real time until detonation. He took another step toward us, casually playing with the pistol. "You're in my experiment. Always have been and always will be." Veronica stepped out from behind me. "Why?" Her voice trembled with barely contained rage. "Why all this? So many lives, so much pain. For what? The question seemed to genuinely interest Mork. He tilted his head, examining us as if we were curious laboratory animals. You know, he began thoughtfully, I've always admired military men. Your ability to function in conditions that would break an ordinary person. I twice tried to join the Special Services Academy. Twice failed the psychological tests. He paused, and something like genuine pain flashed in his eyes. Unstable, prone to sadistic tendencies, incapable of empathy, as if these were deficiencies for someone who must kill without hesitation. He almost shouted the last words. They rejected me but accepted people like you, Major. Those who hide their darkness deeper, who wear it like a second skin rather than a suit. He shook his head, returning to his usual cold mask. So I found another path. If I can't be you, I'll create you. Study, take apart, and reassemble. Prove that psychological barriers are an illusion, that anyone, even the most resilient operative, can be reprogrammed. He aimed the pistol at Veronica. And the wealthy clients, they just provide funding. They're interested in entertainment, I'm interested in science. 2 minutes, I said, slowly moving to position myself in the line of fire instead of Veronica. Even if you kill us, you won't have time to escape. Oh, there's plenty of time, smiled Mork. The real timer is with me, he tapped his finger on his wristwatch. And yours, let's just say it's a bit accelerated. I took another step, reducing the distance. Instinct told me he was speaking the truth. We had more real time than announced over the loudspeaker. Otherwise, he wouldn't be wasting it on conversations. Don't move, Major, warned Mork, gripping the pistol with both hands. I know all your hand-to-hand combat tactics, every move, every feint. Not all, I smiled. And then, acting with lightning speed honed by years of training, I lunged forward, using a movement we were taught only in a closed Special Forces program. A technique codenamed Dead Hand, the last resort for an operative who found himself unarmed against an armed opponent. Mork fired, but I had already moved from the line of fire, shifting at a non-standard angle. The bullet passed within millimeters of my shoulder. A fraction of a second later I was beside him, blocked his wrist, and twisted his arm until a crack was heard. The pistol fell from his fingers, but he didn't scream. Instead, he delivered a powerful blow with his free hand, the very one I had learned in Kandahar from a hand-to-hand combat instructor. We grappled, mirroring each other's movements. To an outside observer, it must have looked surreal, two absolutely identical men engaged in a mortal combat. Every blow I delivered, he parried with frightening precision. Every combination I started, he read before it was completed. Finding ourselves in a clinch, when our faces were centimeters apart, he hissed, I know you better than you know yourself. Every scar, every nightmare, every skeleton in the closet. He was right. Mork had studied me for years, but there was one thing he couldn't know, one detail that wasn't in official reports or psychological profiles. During my last operation in Afghanistan, our group was ambushed. We found ourselves in a difficult situation, trapped in a narrow gorge under a barrage of fire from superior enemy forces. Communication was lost, ammunition was running out, and I made a decision I never mentioned in reports. A decision that saved my life but cost 2 of my comrades theirs. I used them as bait while I took up a firing position. They died. I survived. This burden of guilt I carried within myself, never confessing to anyone. And with this memory came my own fighting technique, born in that dusty Afghan crevice, to accept pain as an old friend and use it as a weapon. I grabbed him by the throat, not trying to avoid his blow to my solar plexus. Pain flared, passing through me, but I didn't let go. Instead, I allowed my body to go limp, creating the illusion that the blow had reached its target. Mork momentarily loosened his grip, and that was enough. I executed a pain compliance technique on his already injured arm while simultaneously sweeping his legs. We crashed to the floor and I rolled, ending up on top. Not giving him time to recover, I delivered a series of blows that, I knew, he didn't expect. Not special forces techniques, but dirty street moves I had learned as a teenager in a rough Philadelphia neighborhood, long before the army. Mork desperately resisted, but with each second, his movements became more chaotic. In his eyes, I saw growing bewilderment. His perfect model of my behavior was crumbling, colliding with the reality of a man who was more than the sum of reports and observations. 1 minute 30 seconds, shouted Veronica. She had picked up Mork's pistol and held it ready but couldn't fire while we fought. I delivered another blow and Mork went limp beneath me. For a moment I thought he had lost consciousness, but it was a ruse. His hand darted to my throat, squeezing it with unexpected strength. Black dots danced before my eyes. I felt my strength ebbing. And then a shot rang out. Mork's grip loosened. I rolled off him, gasping for air, and saw a hole in his shoulder. Several meters away stood Veronica with a pistol in her hands. Her face was pale, but her eyes sparkled with determination. "We have to go, Connor," she said, not taking her eyes off Mork. "Right now." I rose, but instead of running to the exit, approached the wounded Mork. He looked at me with a strange mixture of pain and admiration. "So even a perfect copy is still just a copy," he rasped. "There will always be something elusive, human." "Connor," Veronica's voice rang with tension. 1 minute. I leaned toward Mork. "Real time until detonation." He smiled with bloodied lips. 10 minutes. Deactivation code 472,591. Central console in the command post. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because now it's much more interesting than just killing you." His eyes feverishly gleamed. "Let's see how far you'll get. Consider it the final phase of the experiment, with several new variables." I could have killed him, should have, but I turned and rushed to Veronica. "We have 10 minutes, not one," he lied. "How do you?" "Trust me," I took her hand. "We can save the others and disable the self-destruct system." She nodded without further questions. We ran to the command post, which I had noticed on the complex schematic earlier. Behind us, I heard Mork's labored breathing, his shuffling steps. Wounded but not defeated, he was still pursuing us. Approaching the command post, we encountered Eva, the fake Veronica. She stood at a corridor junction, confused and frightened like a cornered animal. "Connor," her face lit up with hope at the sight of me. Then her gaze fell on the woman beside me and her eyes widened with understanding. "You found her, your real wife." Veronica froze, studying her perfect copy. Two women, outwardly indistinguishable from each other, met gazes across the separating space. "You," began Veronica. "No time," I interrupted this surrealistic moment. "We're going to disable the self-destruct system, then to the exit, coming with us." Eva nodded and joined us. Together, we reached the command post, a spacious room with dozens of monitors and control panels. I immediately headed to the central console and entered the code Mork had given, 472,591. The screen flickered, then displayed. Cleansing protocol deactivated. Systems returning to normal operation. The mechanical voice announced. "Attention all personnel. Cleansing protocol canceled. Repeat, cleansing protocol canceled. This is not a drill. Immediate return to workstations required." I exhaled with relief, but didn't relax. This was only the first part of the plan. "Find exit diagrams," I commanded Eva and Veronica. "We need the shortest route outside." They dispersed to different consoles, studying complex schematics. Meanwhile, I discovered the communication system and activated the external channel. I dialed the emergency service. 911, what's your emergency? "This is Major Connor Ramirez, former Special Forces. I'm in a secret complex approximately 40 miles north of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. People are being held here against their will. There are victims. Need police, FBI, and medical assistance. Sir, can you specify coordinates? I looked at the GPS data on one of the monitors and dictated them. Sir, please stay on the line. The connection was cut. I turned and saw Vincent Mork at the command post entrance. His hand rested on the control panel. He had just disconnected the communication. Despite his wound and blood loss, he was still standing. In his other hand, he clutched a pistol aimed at me. Bravo, Major. His voice was weak but determined. You've truly exceeded my expectations. Deactivated the protocol, called for help, even found your real wife. Magnificent. Veronica and Eva froze at their consoles. Mork kept all of us at gunpoint, slowly moving to the center of the room. But the experiment isn't over yet. The final phase remains. Enough, Mork. I stepped forward, shielding both women. You've lost. Soon police and FBI will be here. The whole world will know what happened here. Mork laughed, and the sound echoed through the command post. You think I fear exposure? The people behind this project are so high up that your testimonies will never see the light of day. They'll simply clean up the territory and move the experiment elsewhere. New participants. The show will go on. His finger tensed on the trigger. But for you three, the show is over. At that moment, Eva did something unexpected. She rushed not away from Mork but toward him. Before anyone could react, she was beside him, embracing him like a lover. Vincent, she whispered with tenderness I had never heard in her voice. Please, enough. For a moment, confusion crossed Mork's face, then something resembling tenderness. His grip on the pistol loosened, and in that very instant, Eva sharply twisted his wrist, as I had taught her during the days we spent together preparing for the escape. A shot rang out. The bullet went into the ceiling. Taking advantage of the hesitation, I lunged forward and knocked the weapon from Mork's hand. We grappled again, but this time the forces were unequal. Weakened by blood loss, he couldn't resist me. With a few precise blows, I rendered him unconscious. Eva stepped back, pressing her hand to her side. Only now did I notice the spreading bloodstain on her blouse. He managed to fire another shot, she explained with a pale smile. Didn't notice. I caught her as her knees buckled. Need to stop the bleeding. Veronica was already beside us, tearing her blouse into strips for an improvised bandage. She's losing a lot of blood. We laid Eva on the floor, and Veronica, using her first aid skills, bandaged the wound. Help is on the way, I said, squeezing Eva's hand. Hold on. You need to leave, Eva spoke with difficulty. He's right about the people behind this. They're powerful and never leave witnesses. I looked around, making a difficult decision. We can't abandon you. You can, she smiled weakly. And should I know another exit, help me get to the service personnel elevator. We split up. At the service elevator, I handed Eva over to two participants we had freed earlier, a sturdy man who resembled a former military person and his wife, a nurse. They vowed to take care of her and ensure she received medical attention. I'll come back for you, I promised, when it's all over. Don't, Eva replied. Start a new life and try to forgive me. I didn't know what to answer. Part of me hated her for the deception. Another part understood she was as much a victim as Veronica and I. Parting with Eva, Veronica and I headed for the main exit. Mork was tied up and left in the command post. The police would find him there, along with evidence of the crimes committed in the complex. But when we almost reached the main doors, the blocking system activated. Massive steel doors descended, cutting off escape routes. What's happening? Veronica looked in panic at the flashing red alarm lights. Backup security protocol activated, came a voice from the speakers. Mork's voice, weak but determined. If I can't complete the experiment, no one can. He had somehow freed himself and reached the communication system. Or, more likely, he had a backup plan from the beginning. 10 minutes until complete detonation, he announced. this time with no possibility of cancellation. I frantically examined the doors, looking for a way to open them. Useless. They were designed to contain an internal explosion to prevent information leakage. There must be an emergency exit. Veronica was also searching for a solution, maybe through ventilation. Too long, I shook my head, and we don't know the configuration. From the speakers came Mork's voice again. Major Ramirez, there's a way to escape, for only one person. Conference room B7 has a separate emergency hatch. It's narrow enough only one of you will fit. Choose wisely. This is my final gift to you, a moral dilemma for the finale. I looked at Veronica. She looked at me. In her eyes, I saw understanding and determination. Let's go, she said, together. We ran to the indicated room, and indeed, under the conference table, we discovered a small hatch, wide enough for only one person. You have to go. I opened the hatch and saw a narrow shaft leading outside. No, Connor, Veronica grabbed my arm. We'll find another way together. 7 minutes until detonation, reminded Mork's voice, clearly enjoying our dilemma. I made a decision. I hugged Veronica, holding her tight, and whispered, "Know that I've always loved you, even when I didn't show it." And then I abruptly pushed her away, shoving her toward the hatch. She didn't have time to react when I had already lifted her and practically stuffed her into the shaft. "Connor!" Her cry echoed in the shaft as I slammed the hatch and blocked it with the table. "Sorry," I whispered, perfectly aware she couldn't hear me. "Noble Major," Mork's voice sounded almost respectful. "Sacrifice for your beloved, the classic hero's choice." I didn't answer him. Instead, I ran back through the corridors to the area with other exits. Somewhere here had to be another way out. I wasn't going to give up. At a corridor intersection, I collided with Mork. He could barely stand, pale from blood loss, but still with a pistol in hand. "Game over, Major," he rasped. "We'll die together, original and copy. Poetic, isn't it?" "You've lost, Mork." I straightened, looking into the eyes of my double. "My wife will survive. The truth about your perverted experiment will become known. Whatever happens to me, you've lost." Anger distorted his face, erasing the last traces of our external resemblance. "They'll never believe." He took a step toward me. "My patrons control the media, the judicial system. They'll hush everything up." "Perhaps," I nodded. "But Veronica knows the truth. Eva knows. Other participants know. Truth has a way of coming out no matter how deeply it's buried." Mork raised the pistol. "Then die with that consolation, Major Ramirez." I lunged at him the moment he pressed the trigger. The shot rang out in the confined space of the corridor, and I felt a burning pain in my side. But my momentum was already carrying me forward, and I knocked Mork down. We rolled on the floor, locked in a final struggle. Blood, mine and his, mixed on the floor. Strength was leaving me, but I put the last remnants of energy into a blow that sent Mork into unconsciousness. 4 minutes until detonation, dispassionately announced the mechanical voice. I struggled to rise, pressing my hand to the bleeding wound. The world around me was swimming, but I forced myself to move. At the end of the corridor, I saw an emergency exit, a small door marked staff only. Gathering my last strength, I reached it and entered the emergency unlock code I remembered from Fisher's data. To my surprise, the door clicked open. Cool night air hit my face. I took a few steps and fell onto the dew-wet grass. I crawled another 20 meters before my strength completely left me. I lay looking at the starry sky, thinking of Veronica, hoping she had escaped, that she had found a path to freedom. In the distance, I heard sirens from approaching emergency vehicles. They wouldn't have time to evacuate the complex before the explosion, but at least they could gather evidence afterward. Darkness was encroaching on the edges of my consciousness when the ground beneath me trembled. I turned my head and saw a flash of bright light, then an overwhelming explosion that tore through the night silence. The complex disappeared in a fireball, and with it, Vincent Mork and all traces of his monstrous experiment. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness, the sound of running footsteps and a woman's voice calling my name. A year has passed. I sat on the porch of a small house on the outskirts of a tiny fishing village in Brazil, watching the sun sink into the ocean. A new name, a new life, a new beginning. The investigation of the explosion at the complex turned out exactly as Mork predicted, superficial and quickly closed. The official version spoke of a gas explosion at a research center. No mention of doubles, deadly games, or sadistic experiments. But I knew the truth, and Veronica knew, and Eva, who survived but disappeared after being discharged from the hospital. They found me half a kilometer from the complex, bleeding out but still alive. Veronica was nearby. She had escaped through the hatch but refused to flee, instead searching the perimeter for another exit through which I might have escaped. We were interrogated, disbelieved, considered insane. But we stuck to our version, and when it became clear that the truth would never be officially accepted, we disappeared. First to Mexico, then further south, changing names and appearances until we found this quiet corner where no one knew us. Life was slowly getting back on track. Nightmares still haunted me, but now Veronica was truly beside me to help deal with them. We healed our wounds, physical and emotional, step by step restoring what had been destroyed. The only thing that clouded our existence was the fear that one day they would find us. Those unknown patrons of the experiment that Mork spoke about. People with enough power to conceal mass murder and perverted psychological experiments. And today, checking the mailbox in the village, I found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph of Eva holding an infant. On the back, written in neat handwriting, "He should know his real father. We're in Buenos Aires." The last rays of the sun disappeared below the horizon, plunging the world into twilight. I heard Veronica's footsteps returning from the beach. In the setting sun's light, her silhouette seemed unreal, like a memory from another life. "What's that?" she asked, noticing the photograph in my hands. I silently handed her the picture. She looked at it for a long time, then shifted her gaze to me. "What are you going to do?" I didn't know the answer. Part of me wanted to burn the photograph and forget about its existence. Another part couldn't stop thinking about the child who might be my son. "We'll handle this," Veronica said quietly, sitting beside me. "Together like everything else." She was right. Whatever awaited us in the future, we would face it together. Not as perfect copies created in a laboratory, but as real people, with all our scars, flaws, and contradictions. I placed the photograph on the small table by the porch and took Veronica's hand. Tomorrow I would make a decision, but today we would just look at the stars, enjoying the fact that we survived hell. And somewhere out there in Buenos Aires, a woman with my wife's face might also be looking at these same stars, holding a child who has bound us all in an unbreakable chain of unanswered questions. If you enjoyed this story, please support the author with a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your emotions in the comments. Thank you.